Hi everyone, welcome to the GDG Fest, and this is the Android track. I'm joined by Anne. Anne, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, my name is Anne. Thank you so much for welcoming. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to see you, and I hope you guys had a really good session during the morning keynote. And I really hope you're also going to learn during this breakout session. So I'm just going to give Irene to introduce our speaker today, who's Rosario. So Irene.
Yes, thank you so much, Anne. So, hi, Irene once more. So today we are joined by Rosario. Rosario is a GDE for Firebase, and is a mobile web app developer at Mosdev. And Rosario has made many contributions to the Firebase open source community and answered hundreds of questions on Stack Overflow. He generally helps developers improving the way they develop their apps. When he's not doing one of these things, he enjoys playing video games. So we are so honored to have you on board, Rosario, with us. We'll just drop off and give you a couple of minutes so that you can take it up with us. So yeah, back to you, Anne.
Hi, Irene. Thank you very
Yes,
much, Irene, for the introduction.
thank
I
you.
think we can have my slides now on the screen.
Yeah, sure. Maybe before you start, do you want to tell us where you're joining us from? How is it where you are now that it's a virtual event? I know so many people are joining us from different parts, and they'd love to know where you're joining us from as well.
Yes, I'm joining you from Maputo, Mozambique.
Oh, nice, nice. So yeah, we are so glad to have you with us, joining
I'm happy to
GDG
be
Fest
here.
Kenya. And yeah, so you can just share your screen and your slides, and then we can start.
All right.
There we go.
Thank you very much. So, as Irene said, my name is Rosario. I'm a GD for Firebase, and I'm also a mobile app developer at a company named Mosdevs. And like also Irene said, I've been working on the Firebase. I've been making contributions to the Firebase open source, and one library in particular that I've been working on is called Firebase KTX, and that's actually what I would like to talk about today. So before we start, let's try and understand what is Firebase. Firebase is, in short, a platform for to make it easier for you to develop mobile apps. So it's like one single platform where you have many different products. So you would say to develop an app, you would need a database. So you have a database in Firebase, you have some authentication systems, you have a service where you can store your files, you have a service where you can host your app if it happens to be a web app, and many other services which you can see in this slide. And most of those services are available for Android, and they are available through Java SDK. But as you may have heard on Google I/O 2019, Google announced that Android is now Kotlin first. Now, even though Kotlin does have good interoperability with Java, some of its code may not seem so concise or so simple. That's why we came up with the Firebase KTX libraries. Now, before I talk about those libraries, I just want to say that all the views and opinions shared here are my own. They do not reflect those of the Firebase team, which I work with. I mean, if you ask them about these libraries, they'll probably share a different view or a different opinion on it. So what I'm sharing here is entirely my own. So let me show you what the libraries look like. So say you're using the Java SDK in Kotlin. You would probably do something like this to create a dynamic link. This is how your code would look. Now, if you were using the Firebase KTX library, your code would be a little shorter, something like this. which I think it looks more idiomatic and more concise to the Kotlin language. So basically today I'll be talking about how we created those KTX libraries, what Kotlin features did we use to create them. Here's a list of the ones that are present in the libraries. I'll be going through each one of them, and then later I'll tell you about some of the features that are not yet on the libraries, but that you can actually implement yourself to get better Kotlin usage. So the core of the library are the Kotlin extensions. I mean, KTX actually stands for Kotlin extensions. And what are Kotlin extensions? They're basically a way that you have to provide, to extend a class with new functionality without actually having to extend from that class or inherit the fields or the functions from that class. So for example, here, if you wanted to add one more property to the string class, we would just say val string, and we tell the name of the property, in this case last char, and then we would assign this last char to something. So in this case, we are assigning it to the last character in that string. Or if, for example, you want to extend another class called rectangle, and you want to add a function which calculates the area of the rectangle, you can simply say function, you tell the name of the class, and then you add this extension. And then when you want to use those properties or those functions, you use it normally as if it was part of the class. So as you can see, there was no need to extend the class or inherit any properties or functions from it. Next, the other feature that we use from the Kotlin language is the object declarations. So in Kotlin, there is this object keyword which is used actually for many stuff, but we only use the declarations which allow you to declare a class using the singleton pattern. So if you're familiar with Java, you probably already know this pattern. So in Kotlin, you can simply use object, and then you declare the name. You say it, the name. You pass it the name of the class. So for example, here we're creating a class called coin. We have only one property and some methods to actually change that property. And as you can see, to use it, those are basically static methods. So you don't need to like use a constructor to create this class. And in Firebase, what we did was actually just create an empty object. This is just object Firebase. And then instead of adding all the methods to this class, we actually created extensions for it. So we created an extension property named database, which gives us the Firebase database instance. We created a Firestore property, which gives us the instance of Firestore, and the same for all the other services or products that we have. One specific case was this one, where some products would need some extra argument or parameter in order to get its instance, and for that we created an extension function instead. So this is basically what it looks like when you're trying to use the new KTX libraries. Another function that we used was the inline keyword. So basically this keyword tells the compiler to not treat our function as a higher order function. So what happens in Kotlin is all functions are treated as higher order, which means some space will be allocated in memory for it. But if you use inline instead of the compiler allocating memory for our functions, it will simply copy the function as it is and paste it on the compiled code. I'm sorry. So here's an example of an inline function that we declare here. We are passing another function as argument to it. We're calling it init. We use this function here, and this is what it looks like when we want to use this function. And when we want to pass another function, we simply use a lambda function, as you can see here. Next, we have Reified type parameters. So sometimes you want a function to have a specific type. So in this example, if you are not using Firebase KTX, maybe we want to use this method called toObject from the data snapshot class. And what happens is, since we're using the Java SDK, we would need to specify the type, saying this is person, and then we'd have to use some extra verbs here, which we could have avoided if we had a Reified function. So this is the function that we created. We actually need to use inline when we're using Reified. For some reason, the Kotlin compiler requires it. And then after declaring this function, the usage becomes a bit shorter and a bit more idiomatic, which is just to object, and then we pass it the type right here. There's no need for this extra verbals. Next, we have type safe builders, which are basically those that are a bit popular in Kotlin. They're DSL, they're also known as DSLs. And this is basically the same example I showed you earlier in the beginning of the presentation, where we simply have something, as you can see here, instead of using builders, we just use those structures. Like, as you can see, the parameters and the Android parameters and the iOS parameters are all inside the same dynamic link, and the code becomes a bit shorter. Next, we have Destructuring Declarations, which is one of my favorite features. If any of you is familiar with JavaScript, you might have already seen something like this. But basically, with Destructuring Declarations, you can actually separate properties from the same object. So as you can see here in the Java SDK, we have a snapshot here being passed as argument to this function. And then we want to access properties from this snapshot. We have the bytes transferred properties. We have the total byte count property. We want to use those two properties to calculate the progress of a certain upload task. Now, if you use the KTX libraries, you don't really need to have this snapshot and then try to access its values. You can simply say, I'm just using the bytes and the total, and then you use it directly on progress. So as you can see, you're actually saving a few lines of code by using the destruction declarations instead. Now, how did we do it? Destruction declarations are pretty easy to do. You just need to declare a function and call it component. Let's start with component 1, and then you assign it a value. So in this case, I'm calling bytes transferred, which is a property from the text snapshot. And then you can add component 2 and assign it to a different property, component 3, component 4, and so on up until component n. Now, those are really great features, but there are more Kotlin features that you probably want to use, and those are not present in the Firebase KTX library. I'm talking about Kotlin Coroutines, Asynchronous Flows, and sealed classes. So let's see what are those. So first we have coroutines. They are also known as lightweight threads. So as you might know, recently on Android 9, I think, async task was deprecated. So we can no longer use that for background processing. So coroutines would be an alternative for it. Some people say this is similar to the concept of async await that we have in other languages, but here we don't. Those are not actually keywords in Kotlin. Instead, we have a single keyword called suspend, which allows us to create suspend functions. And it's a way to escape callback hell. So if you've been working with callbacks, you might know what I'm talking about. So if we use, let's say we have a document from a user called John, and we want to access this document. And then after accessing it, we want to also access a different collection, which could be maybe a collection that contains all the friends of John, and we want to get all this information and display it on our app. What we will do is first get the collection, add a listener or a callback, and then go to the friends collection. Once again add another listener or a callback, and then once we have both values, we would join them and show. As you can see, if we had more collections to go through, if we had more documents to go through, we would be adding callbacks and callbacks and callbacks leading up to callback help. So to avoid that, we can use coroutines. Let me just show you the example here of what it would look like. So say we have a suspend function called load user data. We would just use a try catch to handle exceptions, and then we will be able to get the user document here by calling get.await. And then once we have the user, we can now call the user friends collection and also get its value, and then we can use those values and display them in our app. As you can see, this code looks more synchronous. We don't have callbacks at all, so our code will probably look better now. Now, this feature is not present in Firebase KTX, but it's actually present on a different library called Kotlin Coroutines Play Services. So if you want to use the library, you simply need to add the dependency to your Gradle file. Next, we have this feature called Asynchronous Flow, which returns multiple asynchronously computed values. So let's have a look at this example. Say I have a function here called simple, which simply returns a list with 3 elements. They're all numbers, so we have 1, 2, 3. And then we're simply printing all the values. So this would print 1, 2, 3. It's a pretty simple example. But let's say we wanted to compute those values. Maybe we could use sequences, which is a feature from the Kotlin language. We would go through each of the values. Let's say we're computing something here, and then we would send the computed value to our main function. The problem with this is it blocks our main thread. So we would need to wait for all the computing to happen. So if you're saying here something like this takes something like 100 milliseconds, the whole computation would take around 300 milliseconds to finish. So our main thread will be blocked for 300 milliseconds. Now, one way to avoid that would be to use a suspend function and maybe use a coroutine. So this would mean we would we declare this simple function as suspend. Then we would do our computation, and once our computation is done, we would return the whole list. But notice that here we're returning, since we're returning a list, once again, the computation needs to finish in order for us to have the whole list. So a solution to that is what we call asynchronous flow. So what flow does is every time a new value is computed or has finished computed, it emits this value. So we don't really need to wait for all the values to be computed before we can use them. How do we do that? We have this extension function called flow, which is a flow builder. And we have also this function called emit, which allows us to emit a value once it is computed. And then on our main function, we simply launch a coroutine using the run blocking function, and we start collecting the values that are being emitted from the flow. So basically, this lambda function will be triggered every time that there's a new value being emitted by the flow, or every time there's a new value that has already been computed, so that we can use them. So how do we use those with Firebase? This is not yet available on KTX, but I hope it can be added soon. This was actually suggested by someone on the Firebase GitHub. So if you're on GitHub, you can check this link. That's pull request number 1252. You'll see this code, which is what's proposed in that pull request. So they're using a callback flow, and they're adding a snapshot listener to handle all the logic. But the reason why this code wasn't accepted yet is because callback flow is still experimental. So that's the only reason why the code is not. But once callback flow becomes stable, I think we'll be able to have flows on the Firebase KTX libraries. But for now, if you want to test it out, you can simply copy the code, add it to your app, and try and use it. Next, we have Silk classes, which are very similar to what we know as enums. So a Silk class can have different, let's say, states. So for example, here I'm declaring a class named result. I can have a success state, which gives me the data, so maybe some data. We have an error state, which would give me maybe an exception. And we could have an in progress state, which, let's say, the result is still loading for some reason, or some computation is happening, and there's really nothing to be passed here. How would we use this? Exactly as you would use an enum, maybe with an if, or maybe with a when statement, a when expression, I'm sorry. And then you just say, like, you just check if the result is success, you do something with this data that is being passed. If the result is an error, you try checking for this exception. Oops. And if it's still in progress, there's nothing being passed, you can simply maybe do something and handle that state. So how can this be useful to us in Firebase? Maybe we could use it to simplify the usage of real-time database. So in the real-time database, we have this listener called child event listener, which is an interface with 5 methods. Those methods are onChild added, onChild changed, onChild removed, onChild moved, and onCancelled. So what happens here is when you're trying to use this listener, you actually have to implement it. And once you implement it, even if you're not using one of those methods, you actually have to declare them. As you can see here, I'm only using the onChild added method, and I don't really care about the others. As you can see, they're just empty functions that I'm not using. So maybe we could use Silk classes to remove all those methods. And how would we do that? We could create a Silk class, maybe called child, and then have states for it. So let's say child added, child changed, child removed, moved, or cancelled. As you can see, I'm passing as arguments the same arguments from the original functions, from those functions. And then we will use this Silk class in conjunction with flow. So we would create a callback flow, we would add the listener, and for each one of the functions, I only used 2 here, for example, but I omitted the others because it wouldn't fit on the slide. But every time we get a value from those functions, we would simply call offer, so that the callback flow can be notified that there is a new value added to it, and then we can collect them. So this is what it would look like. So you have your database reference, you access the flow, and then you start collecting. And as you can see, I only care about child added. I don't really care about the other functions. So I'm only using an if statement to check if there is a new child added to my database reference. And I no longer need to handle all the other cases that I don't care about. I don't need to handle if some child was removed or moved or anything else. And as you can see, this code is much shorter than the previous code we had there with all the functions. Here I've linked some resources which you can use to learn more about those libraries. I'll be sure to share those slides with all of you. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Much. Thank you so much, Rosario, for that session. I hope you guys have, learned a bit. I'm not really an Android person, but at least, I have picked up one, two, three. Maybe I might drop into Android one of these fine days. But Rosario, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, for taking us to the session. So I think we are going to start taking questions from the audience. So in case you have any question, please leave it on the YouTube chat, and then we'll get back to you. I think I saw one here from Michael Nderito, and he asked, how does Firebase compare to personal hosting for apps that scale in terms of cost?
Okay, great question. So Firebase has this pricing plan called Pay as you go. So you usually get a free quota which you can use for free. There's a certain limit. I think I don't remember the exact limit right now, but it must be around 1 gig. And then once you go over 1 gig, let's say your users have now used 2 gigs of hosting, and you can now pay a very small amount that is a bit extra. You'll only be paying for this one extra gig. You'll not be paying for anything else. So yeah, I would say the pricing is one of the main features that I would prefer to use Firebase instead of my personal hosting. At least for apps that I see that those are scaling. So yeah. And I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I didn't show I was on mute. I was on
Yeah.
the other side checking questions. So thank you so much for that. Like, uh, anyone with any question, so that you can go. Um, as people do questions, could you please tell us your journey? Like how did you decide you wanted to go the Android side as people submit questions? Uh, Rosario.
Yeah, that's funny. Actually, I was just finishing high school when I learned Java a bit, and then I thought since I'm using Java, maybe I should search for something else that also uses Java, and I found Android to use Java too, so I thought I would learn it. So I actually found a book about it. I started reading a book about Android development, and I actually liked it very much. I mean, the framework is pretty different from what I was used to. I thought it was exciting, and that's actually how I started by simply reading books and trying to implement to create some simple apps with them. And yeah, that's how I started, I would say.
So, like, do you feel it's something you will stay for long, or are you still exploring, new ideas, playing, with something new, or you just feel like, like you're comfortable where you are?
No, I started this like 4 years ago or almost five. So I think I'm pretty comfortable with it. I think I'll stay with it for a long time.
Okay, all right. So there's a question by Jerry. He asked, "Will you recommend using inbuilt Firebase caching or implementing my own caching with the room?"
Good question. Thank you very much, Jerry. So what happens in Firebase? We actually have two databases. So if you're using the real-time database, you have caching, and if you're using Cloud Firestore, you also have caching. I think the caching from Cloud Firestore and the real-time database should work just fine. Uh, they do have an expiration date usually, but those are usually very long, so it takes a while for data to expire. So if you really need to persist for a longer time, you can try using Loom, I would say. But if you just want persistence for a short time, it should work just fine without room. So it's really up to you. You should be able to decide. You can try not using room at first, and if you see that it's not fitting your needs, then you can implement room afterwards.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Jerry. I hope your question is has been answered and you're good to go. So we'll take another question from Choni. So Choni
Mhm.
asks, how can you advise a person migrating from Java to Kotlin?
That's a good question because I actually had my struggles as well with this process.
Mm-hmm.
I would say try reading the documentation. The Kotlin documentation is very clear. Also, try. There are many sites that usually compare Java with Kotlin. So they usually have a side by side snippets. So this is the Java code. This is the equivalent in Kotlin. Checking those out. They can be really helpful for you to understand them. But the documentation is also a good entry point.
Okay. Uh, Irene, could you take over? So we wait for maybe some people to ask questions.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So thanks so much, Rosario. Like that was so insightful. I know a number of developers have been in a position to learn from you and the session today. So I know so many people are asking, how can I get the slides? How will you be in a position to share? So and then others are also probably asking, how can they connect with you? Like, do you have a Twitter handle? How they can they reach you? Or in case they have questions or in case they want to be mentored, how can they just connect with you as well? So that is something else that we're also getting so many people ask today. So I don't know, how can they connect
Sure.
with you?
I'll be uploading the slides to Speaker Deck, and I'll share on my Twitter
Okay.
account. So the Twitter handle is actually there on screen. It's at underscore RP Fernandez.
Okay, so we'll just type that on the chat so that guys can be in a position to get it. And then I think someone else has also asked, Joel Kani, how can I
Mhm.
delete data in a recyclable in Firebase real-time databases in Kotlin? So
Okay,
yeah.
this sounds like a very specific question. I would need to see some samples or some code that you wrote. So I would say, Joel, please reach out to me on Twitter, and we can have a chat about it, and maybe I can help you if I can see the code.
Okay, so I think Joel will just reach out to Rosario, and then he'll be in a position to give you like specific answers to your question. Yeah, but I think otherwise it's been a really nice session, and thank you so much for just coming to join us at DevFest Kenya. We are so happy to have you, to have had you today, and we'll be calling you more and more often, like in next year's DevFest and the DevFest to come. So I know people will be reaching out to you for questions, and we've also shared your Twitter handle on the chat, so they'll be in a position to just connect with you directly. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, but maybe one question, more of personal question. So if you are not doing, let's say, Android, or what else? What else could you, or which other track would you go for? If
I
not
think
Android,
I think backend development is something I also enjoy.
oh, okay,
So yeah, I would be building backends for web apps or Android apps or anything else.
okay, great, great. So yeah, so that's it from Rosario. Rosario, I don't know, you have two words you want to leave us our viewers with before we end the session? For
Sorry.
people who are just getting started, do you have like any sort of of advice for people who have just joined, beginners who've joined the call today? They've been inspired by your talk and they want to get started in Android. They want to start building with Firebase. Do you have anything you'd want to leave them with before we end the session?
Yeah, I would say practice. I think practice is key to get good at to always get good at something.
Yeah.
Always check documentation. I know reading may not be the most fun thing to do, but it can actually help you a lot. look for videos online. There's plenty of content on the internet, videos, blog posts, podcasts, and things that can help you. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Always ask questions, and I'm sure people will be able to help you.
Okay, okay, great. So thank you so much, Rosario, for joining us.
Thank you for having
Uh,
me.
yeah, someone else has asked. There's a question from the DJ. How do I listen to change data using child change or child added events? I don't know if this is something you can take up before you drop off from the call, or uh, will they also reach out to you?
I think it's
Yeah.
better if they reach out on Twitter.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So the DJ, we've shared Rosario's Twitter handles on the chat. Feel free to DM him and feel free to just reach out to him, and he'll be in a position to answer your question. So there are questions that are just coming in right now when we're almost dropping. There's also one more that has just popped in from Raj. Uh, so I think Raj
Actually,
is
I
asking,
think
yeah,
I think it's
he's
answering
asking us,
the question from Jerry. Thank you
yeah.
very much, Rad.
Right. Okay. Perfect. So that's it from Rosario, and thank you so much for coming. And so uh, so moving to the next session. So we'll be having our next speaker in a couple of hours. Her name is Mariam. She is the GDE Firebase as well, and the first female GDE in Pakistan. So just stay tuned. We'll be having the next session at around 2 p.m. and it will be so nice to have all of you, joining the session. So yeah, and you want to add something to it as well?
No, I think you have said it all. We will have the next session just here, so feel free to come back and check if session has started. And
Mhm.
it was so nice having you. I hope you guys have learned a bit. I hope you have
Yeah.
picked up 1, 2, 3 that you can implement, especially you Android developers. So yeah, feel free to share with your friends. Feel free to discuss. You can go to the Discord session, check what people are doing. So it's just be interactive network as we wait for the next session to start. So thank you so much for joining us.